They stopped replying. Not just to you, to everyone. No explanation, no argument, no dramatic exit. One day they were there, the next, they were gone. And the story most people tell themselves is simple. They got arrogant. They think they're better than everyone else. They just couldn't handle real connection. But that's not what psychology tells us. Not even close. If you've ever watched someone brilliant, someone you admired, someone who always seemed one step ahead, quietly disappear from your life without saying a word, or maybe you're that person, and you've carried the guilt of walking away without ever knowing how to explain why, then this video may give you the explanation you've been searching for. Welcome to the mental model, where we use neuroscience and psychology to explain what's happening inside your mind, even when the people around you don't have the words for it. Today, we're exploring 5 psychological mechanisms that explain why the most intelligent people in any room often disappear from it. Not because they're cold, not because they're broken, and not because they don't care, but because something is happening inside their brain that most people, including them, have never been able to name. And by the end of this video, you'll have that name. Let's begin.
Here's something most people never realize about the way a highly intelligent brain processes conversation. For the average person, small talk is relatively effortless. The weather, weekend plans, sports scores, the brain barely notices. But for someone with a highly analytical mind, that exact same conversation demands far more mental energy. Research on cognitive bandwidth suggests that highly intelligent people process social interactions at a level of depth that most of us never even realize is happening. They're not simply listening to your words. They're reading the subtext, watching your body language, comparing your tone to your actual message, and mentally evaluating several possible responses before they choose even one. All of that is happening at the same time, automatically, without conscious effort. It's not a choice. It's simply how their brain is wired. Over time, this constant processing creates something psychologists call cognitive fatigue, a form of mental exhaustion that doesn't come from working harder. It comes from processing more. Simply being present in a social environment can become mentally expensive. A study published in the British Journal of Psychology revealed something that completely changes the way we think about intelligence and socializing. Researchers found that people with higher intelligence consistently reported lower life satisfaction the more often they socialized. Not slightly lower, significantly lower. The more time they spent in social situations, the worse they tended to feel afterward. This isn't antisocial behavior. It's a brain paying a cognitive cost that most people never notice, and eventually deciding that the cost has become too high. The disappearance isn't rejection, it's recovery. Now, let's look at the second mechanism. This is the one most people mistake for coldness, but in reality, it's something much more precise. Highly intelligent people often develop what psychologists describe as a signal-to-noise ratio problem. In information theory, the signal is what carries meaning. The noise is everything that doesn't. And for a brain that's constantly searching for meaning, depth, and patterns, most everyday conversations simply don't contain enough signal. Not because the people involved are bad, not because the subjects are unimportant, but because the amount of meaningful information is far below what that mind naturally seeks. Over time, this creates something very few people are willing to admit, a kind of boredom that can feel almost physical. Research suggests that highly intelligent people have a much lower tolerance for conversations that lack depth, nuance, or novelty. Their brain interprets the absence of stimulation as a form of stress. So gradually, and almost without realizing it, they begin to filter.
The group chats stop getting replies. The invitations are politely declined. And friendships that once felt perfectly comfortable begin to feel like background noise inside a mind that's constantly searching for something more meaningful. And this is where it becomes painful. Because the filtering isn't personal. The person being filtered out hasn't done anything wrong. But from the outside, it looks exactly like abandonment. It feels exactly like rejection. And the intelligent person rarely knows how to explain what's happening without sounding as though they believe they're better than everyone else. So they don't explain it. They become quieter. And eventually, they disappear. The group chats stop getting replies. The invitations are politely declined. And friendships that once felt perfectly comfortable begin to feel like background noise inside a mind that's constantly searching for something more meaningful. And this is where it becomes painful. Because the filtering isn't personal. The person being filtered out hasn't done anything wrong. But from the outside, it looks exactly like abandonment. It feels exactly like rejection. And the intelligent person rarely knows how to explain what's happening without sounding as though they believe they're better than everyone else.
Highly intelligent people do not grow at the same rate as the people around them. This is not arrogance. This is developmental psychology. When a person reads obsessively, thinks deeply, challenges every assumption, and refuses to let comfortable ideas go unexamined, they change faster than most and in different directions. Psychologists call this intellectual divergence, a widening gap between the worldview of a high cognitive person and the people they grew up with, worked beside, or called their closest friends. And here is what no one tells you about that gap. It is not painful because you think you're better. It is painful because you remember when you were the same. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from sitting across from someone you've known for years, someone you genuinely love, and quietly realizing, with a kind of silent heartbreak, that you no longer share the same world. You still care deeply about that person, but you've outgrown the relationship. And most highly intelligent people never learn how to say that without making the other person feel abandoned or discarded. So they don't say it. They become quieter. They stay busier. And little by little, they disappear. Not to punish anyone, not to prove a point, but because staying would mean pretending to be a version of themselves they no longer recognize. And eventually, the cost of maintaining that performance becomes greater than the cost of walking away. The fourth mechanism is the one most people mistake for a personality change. They'll often say things like, "You used to be so much fun. You used to be more present. You used to care." But what they're actually witnessing isn't a personality change. It's the end of a performance. Highly intelligent people, especially those with deep self-awareness, develop an extraordinary sensitivity to social performance. The pressure to laugh at jokes they don't find funny, to agree with opinions they don't truly share, to make themselves smaller, simpler, easier to understand, so they fit the version of themselves that other people are comfortable with. Psychologists describe this as identity performance cost, the psychological burden of continually presenting a version of yourself that doesn't reflect who you really are. And the research is remarkably consistent. The greater a person's cognitive complexity, the greater the emotional cost of maintaining that performance, and the less willing they become to keep doing it. So what happens isn't withdrawal. What happens is refusal. A quiet, almost invisible refusal to keep showing up as someone they are not, simply to make other people comfortable. From the outside, it looks like coldness. It looks like arrogance. It looks like they changed. But from the inside, it's often the first truly honest thing they've allowed themselves to do in years. The fifth and final mechanism is the one that changes everything. It comes from evolutionary psychology, specifically from what researchers call the savanna theory of happiness. The theory proposes that human happiness is partly shaped by the conditions our ancestors evolved in, including the deep biological need to belong to a tribe. For most humans, social connection is not optional. It is a survival mechanism coded into the nervous system over hundreds of thousands of years. But here is where it gets precise. Research published in the British Journal of Psychology found that higher intelligence fundamentally changes the relationship between social contact and psychological well-being. For most people, more social contact equals more happiness. The tribal belonging instinct functions exactly as evolution intended. For highly intelligent people, more social contact equals less happiness. So let's bring everything together. When an intelligent person disappears, it isn't arrogance. Mechanism 1. Their brain is paying a cognitive cost that most people never see. Mechanism 2. They begin filtering out the noise to protect the signal their mind needs. Mechanism 3. They've outgrown a world they still love parts of. Mechanism 4. They've stopped performing, someone they were never meant to be. Mechanism 5. Their brain doesn't rely on belonging in quite the same way most people do. And that isn't a flaw. If you're the one who was left behind, their disappearance was never a judgment of your worth. And if you're the one who quietly walked away, your silence wasn't cruelty. It was simply the only language you had for something that never had the right words. Both of those truths can exist at the same time, without anyone. I'm the villain. Before you go, I'd like to ask you something. In the comments, tell me which side of this story you recognize. Were you the one who quietly walked away? Or were you the one who was left behind? Because almost everyone watching this video has lived one of those experiences. And both deserve understanding. If today's video, without anyone having to become the villain. Before you go, I'd like to ask you something. In the comments, tell me which side of this story you recognize. Were you the one who quietly walked away?